Shabbat Shalom. I want you to take a minute, if you will, and think about the last time you disagreed with somebody. That wasn't meant to be the joke. All the married couples just raised their hand, right? Think of the last time you disagreed with someone or you debated with someone. About any issue, politics, religion, who should do the dishes, it doesn't matter. The last time you disagreed or debated with someone. Now I wonder, what would it have taken for you to really hear the other side of the argument? What would it have taken for you to really let yourself be open to being convinced? All the more so, what would it take not just for you to be convinced of an idea? What would it take to convince you to change your life in some significant way? What sort of information, what sort of argument, what kind of persuasive attempt needs to be made in order for you to change your life in some significant way? The story is told of a young boy who was not a big fan of religious school. Surely he didn't go to the Shaarey Zedek religious school. So this young boy is not a big fan of religious school, and in their religious school class, they happen to be in the midst of studying Genesis. And not just Genesis, but really creation. They're really focusing on the creation story. They're going deep into the text, the very beginning of Bereshit, the beginning of Genesis. And each and every week, sure enough, they're studying Genesis, and each and every week this young boy says, yeah, it didn't happen. Didn't happen. Yeah, I read it. Didn't happen. And each and every week he argues with the teachers. This couldn't have happened. And each and every week when he comes home and his parents say, what did you learn at religious school? He says, we talked about Adam and Eve, the creation story, but you know what? It didn't happen. So sure enough, one day, the boy comes home from religious school and his parents ask him, what did you learn in religious school? And he says, we learned about Adam and Eve, but you know what? It didn't happen. Well, that one particular Sunday when he came home from religious school, he saw sitting on his parents' counter an old Chumash, right? An old copy of the Torah. It was worn, clearly well used, a little bit beaten up. It was a little out of place, so the boy asked his parents, where did this Chumash come from? And the parents said, this was your grandparents' Chumash. Cool, this is my grandparents' Chumash. So he picks it up and he flips to the very beginning of Genesis. And out falls a very large fig leaf. He takes a look at the fig leaf. He takes a look at his parents. He says, Mom and Dad, I found Adam's clothing. It's true, it happened. What would it take for you to change your mind about something? We read this week Shabbat Balak, really this amazing, crazy story. If the Torah is going to be considered humorous, it's this one section of the Torah that could actually be considered a comedy scene. So if you'll turn with me, please, in your Eitz Chaim Chumashim to page 894. 894. And you know, our ancestors are making their way from Mitzrayim to Eretz Yisrael, from Egypt to the promised land of Israel. And because of the punishment, God says, I'm not going to take you the short way, I'm going to take you the long way. Or as others say, because Moses, being a typical man, he was so stubborn, he refused to stop and ask for directions. It's going to take them the 40 years to get through the wilderness. So to accomplish that, if you can picture in your head, they come south out of Egypt, down along the Sinai, up and around the east side of Eretz Yisrael. And now we're going to focus on a particular kingdom or a particular region called Moab. Now we know of Moab back from the story of Genesis with Lot and his daughters. And the people of Moab are descendants of that incestuous relationship. If you can think of it, if any of you have been to the Dead Sea, sort of the southern part of the Dead Sea, and you've looked over to the other side of the Dead Sea in what is modern-day Jordan, that's Moab. That's the land of Moab. All right? The Israelites have to come through Moab in order to go a little further north where they're going to enter into Eretz Yisrael in Jericho. So they have to pass through this land of Moab. And we read here, Vayar Balak ben Sipur et kol asher asa Yisrael le'Amori. Balak, the son of Sipur, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites on their way through. Moab was alarmed because that people was so numerous. Moab dreaded the Israelites. And Moab said to the elders of Midian, now this horde will lick clean all that is about us as an ox licks up the grass of the field. Balak, son of Sipur, who was the king of Moab at the time, sent messengers to Balaam, son of Beor and Pethor, which is by the Euphrates, in the land of his kinsfolk. So I'll stop right there. What's interesting is the first time Balak is mentioned, there's no title given to him. The second time Balak is mentioned, he's called the king of Moab. Our ancestors come to teach why the difference, why one time with the kingship and one time without. And the answer is because when we first see Balak, he's not yet the king. But he's so afraid of the Israelites, and he uses that fear and he cultivates that fear among the Moabite people, so much so that he says, I'm the only one you can trust to help defeat the Israelites. And that's why when we hear about him again the second time around, he is king, because he played off of fear and anxiety in order to gain his position. So here now Balak, son of Sipor, was the king of Moab. He sent messengers to Balaam. Balaam is a prophet living probably roughly in modern-day Iraq. He's a prophet for hire. And so Balak, the king, says to Balaam, the prophet, there is a people that came out of Egypt. It hides the earth from view, and it is settled next to me. Come then, put a curse upon this people for me, since they're too numerous for me. Perhaps I can thus defeat them and drive them out of the land, for I know that he whom you bless is blessed indeed, and he whom you curse is cursed. That's the power that this evil prophet Balaam has. He's a prophet for hire. Whomever he blesses is blessed, whomever he curses is cursed. And so sure enough, Balaam is not sure whether to accept this appointment, because Balaam actually calls upon the God of Israel for his source of information. And so it is when Balak comes to Balaam that Balaam sees God in a dream. And God says to Balaam, do whatever you want. Just don't curse the Israelites. You do whatever you want, but don't curse the Israelites. And sure enough, the next morning, Balaam decides to say to Balak the truth. I can't do this. God doesn't want me to curse the Israelites. And so Balak has a good idea. He ups the amount of money he's going to pay Balaam. And sure enough, the next thing we know is Balaam has jumped on his donkey, taken a couple servants with him, and he's on his way to the land of Moab in order to curse the Israelites. Well, in some ways, God trusts Balaam not to curse the Israelites because, after all, he told him not to. But at the same time, God is a little bit angry that Balaam rushed to do this, to fulfill this assignment to whatever extent he was going to play along. And so God causes the donkey that Balaam is riding on to veer to the left. And so Balaam whacks his donkey, and the donkey stops. And they start riding a little bit, and then the donkey veers to the right, and Balaam whacks the donkey again. The donkey stops and starts going, and then all of a sudden the donkey once again stops. And Balaam starts whacking the donkey and saying, what are you doing? Keep going, I have a job to do. The donkey in the Torah turns to Balaam and says, why in the world are you hitting me? We have now the first talking ass. And so sure enough, Balaam and the donkey engage in a conversation. And the donkey says to Balaam, all these years we've been riding together. You've never doubted me. You've never had a problem. Don't you think there's something going on right now? And Balaam begins to now reconsider what he's doing. And he says, okay, I'll stop hitting you, but keep going forward. And then just as they're about to go forward, an angel of the Lord appears and says to Balaam, I'm the reason your donkey hasn't been going straight. Don't curse the Israelites. Well, now Balaam is convinced. He's got a talking donkey. He's got an angel of the Lord appearing before him. And so Balaam is perplexed. And he says, okay, I can't curse the Israelites. But sure enough, eventually he makes his way over to Moab, and Balak meets him, and he says, there are the Israelites down there, and they're standing up on a cliff overlooking the Jewish people. And Balak says to Balaam, now curse the Israelites. And what comes out of Balaam's mouth? A blessing. And Balak says, no, you got it all wrong. I didn't hire you to bless, I hired you to curse. Do it now. So again, Balaam opens his mouth, and what comes out of Balaam's mouth? A blessing. And yet again, now Balak is really angry, and he says to Balaam, listen, I paid you to curse the Israelites. Now do it. And Balaam opens his mouth once again, and he offers yet again a blessing, including one that we know very well, Matovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, the dwelling places, O Israel. And our text ends with Balaam going back home and Balak going back to his home, all in a huff, all angry. Now the question becomes, Balaam told Balak that he couldn't curse the Israelites. Yet time and again, Balak kept asking Balaam to curse the Israelites. And what we see after Balaam says, I can't do it, is we actually see 3 blessings come forth out of his mouth. Why wasn't Balak convinced that what Balaam said was true? Why did it take going through all of that? And Balak still wouldn't accept the fact that Balaam wasn't going to curse the Israelites. Could it be because we, by human nature, are a little reluctant to change our minds? Now, I don't know about any of you, but there are probably a few stubborn people in the world you may have come across, or 2, perhaps, who don't want to change their mind, even when presented with significant facts, even when presented with persuasive argument. And so, I came across recently a study that was conducted at Stanford University. See, they don't want to change their minds. They want to stay and listen to the sermon, but alas. And so, in this study, I have to get myself together now. In this study from Stanford, they took 2 groups of people who disagreed with regard to capital punishment. One group that was in favor of capital punishment and believed that capital punishment deterred crime. The other group that was opposed to capital punishment and said that capital punishment does not deter crime. And they presented to each of these groups 2 studies. Each study was full of facts. Each study was full of information. But one study said, yes, capital punishment deters crime. And the other punishment says capital punishment does not deter crime. And they were equal in facts, they were equal in strength, they were equal in argument, and they were entirely made up, though neither group knew that at the time. So sure enough, the group that was in favor of capital punishment saw these 2 studies and said, aha, the one that supports capital punishment is clearly far superior to the one that opposes capital punishment, and that research that opposes capital punishment, I don't accept it. It's wrong. It must be, I'll just say it's wrong. How about that? And they went to the other group, the group that opposed capital punishment. And want to guess what they said? That study that says capital punishment deters crime, it's wrong. It's all wrong. We don't trust it. We don't accept it. But that study that says capital punishment doesn't deter crime, that's a good study. That one was well done. What exists among us is something called confirmation bias. You accept we accept the information that already fits in with our view of the world. We accept the argument, we accept the knowledge, whenever it kind of jives with that which we already believe. It's called a confirmation bias. And our willingness to actually open ourselves up to alternative points of view is exceptionally small. We see it with Balak and Balaam. Balak refused to accept, even though Balaam told him he wasn't going to curse the Jewish people. Balak refused to accept that truth time and again. So here we stand on Shabbos. Here we are, part of a country that is truly at battle with each other. Here we are living in a day and age when no one wants to accept an alternative fact as truth. When no one wants to really give ear to a different side of the argument. Here we are also just a couple months away from Rosh Hashanah and the beginning of a new year. In this week in which we read Parshat Balak, in this week when we are really reminded of our human tendency toward confirmation bias, let me challenge you. Open yourself up to the other side. Listen with both ears and only speak out of one mouth. Consider the alternative. And when engaging in debate or disagreement, don't do so looking to simply convince or to win. Do so seeking to understand and to learn. When engage with whatever that other side might be, engage with an open heart and an open mind. And most importantly, as we come now to these last couple months of 5777 and we look ahead to 5778, as your rabbis and as others might suggest to you to add a little more Judaism into your life, maybe instead of just dismissing us outright, maybe you'll open your minds and your hearts. And when we ask you, what is one more step you can take in your Jewish journey as we conclude this year 5777? Maybe you'll take that question seriously and begin to look at your own life and how your Jewish journey can be enhanced and life made more meaningful. This week of Parashat Balak, may we learn to open our minds and open our hearts, that our life may be made more meaningful. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will. And let us say together, Amen.